All right, welcome back. My name is Darren Thomas, and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. In this particular video, we're going to be looking at how you can customize the display of a Bokeh data visualization using Python. So let's go ahead and see what we can learn. All right, so we're not going to be doing anything new per se in this particular video. We're going to be learning how to modify things, how to change the background, how to change the actual glyphs, if you will, the data points. All these things are things we're going to be discussing. So why don't we go ahead and see what we can do here. So here are our libraries right here. So what we're going to be dealing with here is a PyDataset. That's where we are going to get our data from. And then Bokeh, we're going to be importing figure to make our X and Y axes and things of that nature. Bokeh.io, we're going to bring in the output underscore file in the show. Output underscore file makes our actual file, and the show shows it. And I don't know if we need this last one. I left this in here, but we're going to also be using pandas as needed. Now, the first thing we're going to do next is go to the next cell, and that's, of course, we're going to set up our data. So we're going to be using the data function that comes from up here. So we're down here now. We're going to be using the data function, and of course, we're going to be importing a data set called Duncan, but we're going to call it DF. And then I'm just going to display it right here. So let me run this cell. I forgot. Okay, now I run this cell. And so here's the data we're going to be playing with. You can see in the first column we have the names of different occupations. Then we have the type of occupation, whether it's professional, white collar, blue collar, income rating on a scale of 0 to 100, education, also prestige. These are all on a scale of 0 to 100. And so this is the data we are going to be using. So before we actually make our before we modify the actual graph, I want to show you what the default one looks like. This will be a review if you have seen prior videos. So what we're doing here is we're making a scatter plot. In this line right here, we are starting by making our axes. So we label the x-axis education and the y-axis income. That's just creating our x and y axis basically. Then in this next line down here, we actually set up our data points. So we subset and pull all the data from education for our X values and all our data for the income for the Y values. This sets up our scatter plot. And then these last two lines down here just save it as a file, as HTML file, and also shows the results. So let's take a look at this. All right, you can clearly see this. There's nothing new here. We have some blue dots on a white background. There's nothing unusual. This is a standard default scatter plot using Bokeh. And what we're going to do now is that we're going to modify things so you can see the difference between the default values, the default settings, and some of the things that you can do potentially with Bokeh. So let's go back. Oops, go back here. All right. Now we're going to show you a little bit of variety here. Let's go ahead and run this. Okay, in this first line here at the top of this cell, we're going to add one more function, if you will, called cureDoc. cureDoc allows us to change the color background and the theme, the color theme of the displayed plot. And then right here, we're just going to subset our data here. So we're going to subset all the occupations that are the type professional or prof, P-R-O-F. We're going to put that in an object called prof. And then all of the blue collar workers or BC, we're going to set those in another item called BC. This is standard stuff for subsetting data. Nothing to really explain there. Next, we set our theme, and our theme here is going to be contrast. So that's going to give us a strong contrast in terms of the colors. That'll make more sense in a second. For our fig, again, this is the same as before. We're just setting up our X and Y axes for education and income. And now here's what's going on. Notice how this time we have two different sets of circles, because what's happening is The first time through, we're using the prof data, and the second time through, we're using the BC data. So we're going to have dots that are determined by whether they're professional workers, professional type workers, or blue collar or BC workers. And so what's the main difference? Well, you can see here we have color. So all of the ones that are professional are going to have a yellow color, and then all the ones that are blue collar or BC are going to have a red color. And then the size, I just made the size 10 because I wanted it to be easy to see. That's really all there is to that, but that is different from the default setting. And as I mentioned here, the legend label prof is telling you where the data came from, BC, where the data came from. And then if you look closely at the X and the Y here, notice how I have the object prof in front of it. That's where I'm getting the data from. Where down here, I have the object BC in front of it. That's where I'm getting that data from. And then these last two lines are just for saving the actual HTML file that is made and of course showing it. So let's take a look at this. All right, I'll make this a little bit bigger for you. So you can see the strong difference. I have a strong black background. That's the contrast theme, if you will. I clearly have the yellow dots represent professionals and the red dots represent blue collar workers. So depending on your audience and who you want to teach or train, this visual can be very powerful. You can clearly see that with professionals, you can see they often have a higher level of education and thus also a higher level of income. That's just the way it is. And so this might be useful, again, depending on your audience, depending on what you want to highlight. This could be one way to display your data. Now let's just contrast this, no pun intended, with the original, and you can see some major differences. Here, all the dots are the same. There's no legend. And so you can't figure out who's blue collar, who's white collar, who's professional here. That data is missing from this plot. However, by adding another layer of complexity, you can capture some categorical data, whether someone is professional or blue collar, as this example shows you. And so you can see the difference. The dots are much bigger here. They're different colors, yellow versus red. You have the strong black background, which really helps to highlight the yellow and the red. Again, this is just one example of what you could potentially do if you are using Bokeh. Now, we're going to do one more before we wrap up this video. And this time, we're just going to play with the actual data point shapes as well. And that'll make more sense in a second. All right, so this time we have three different objects that we're creating. We're subsetting whether they're WC, which is white collar, whether they're professional, and also whether they are blue collar. So the new one is this guy right here. He's new, but the other two have been there in the past. This is a repeat of the previous two visualizations. We're just creating our figure here with our x-axis and our y-axis. And then now notice how I have three different glyphs that I'm making. But notice something unique this time. Here I have circle, so that means all the shapes here are going to be for circle. And if you look closely, you can see I'm pulling the data from the WC, or the white collar workers, and they're also going to be purple, and their size is 10. Then the next set is going to be squares. That's going to be our proof data, our professionals. They're going to be red, and then also they're going to be the same size. Then down here we have our triangles. That's going to be for our BC or our blue collar workers. And this is also going to have the color green as its color, and it's going to be the same size, that is the size of 10. So it's mostly the same, but again, what we've changed this time is the shape of the actual data point. So we're going to go ahead and run this. I'll make this nice and big for you. All right, so you can see here that now we have three different categories now. WC for white collar, PROF or prof for professional, and BC for blue collar. So you can see the blue collars tend to be at the bottom. We've seen those before. The professionals tend to be at the top. And then of course the white collars are kind of in the middle, kind of generally ahead of the blue collars, but not always quite with the the professionals, but they're kind of more of a mixed bag, if you will. But again, you can clearly see a contrast in the different shapes and the colors. And of course, we have our legend right here. This is not the best place to put it. We could move that around, but that's for a different video. We're just kind of keeping things as simple as possible. So again, whether or not this is valuable really depends on what is the purpose and goal of your visualization. And that is something that will have to be left up to you. So let's go ahead and see if we can contrast this with our original one. So here's our original one. This works. All the data points are the same. You have no indication of the categorical variable of type. That's not present in this particular graph. But here you can clearly see how we're able to identify the different categories while also being aware of the education level and the income level. So we're able to display 3 variables this way compared to the traditional regular scatter plot. And that's the power of it. So let's go ahead and see if we can kind of summarize what we learned and complete this video. So in this particular video, we looked at how we can take advantage of manipulating the display or customizing it for whatever our purposes are using Bokeh. And so we started first by, of course, setting up our data and running our default graph. We've already seen that. And then we moved into how we can customize it. So we started by having a background that was different, a contrast background. That's what we did here. And then we set up our different glyphs, if you will, that we wanted to use. And we ran our output. Then we did it a second time where we, this time had 3 different glyphs this time. And we also have the same background. And one thing I need to mention is that once you set the theme, you have to, of course, change it. Otherwise, it'll stay the same. So you can see I set the theme right here, but there's nothing in my code down here because I had already set the theme. And so that's something you got to keep in mind. If you wanted to go back, you got to reset it. And so once I was able to set these up, I was able to include the information of my categorical variable with my 2 continuous variables. That was one of the main benefits of tweaking the display in this particular example. So again, I really want to thank you so much for watching and listening to this particular video. My name is Darren Thomas. I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. Thank you again for watching, and you take care.